So you made yourself a set of sweet dungeon tiles. You put them on your table at your last game and everybody loved it. But you want to enhance the look a little bit further. As you may have guessed, I'm not a fan of having walls on my tiles. They impede visibility, they can get in the way while you're trying to play, and honestly, they're not that necessary. But that doesn't mean that I don't love some 3D elements popping up off the tiles to give things some more dynamics. So you got a room and you want some pillars for your players or monsters or whatever to be able to hide behind, to knock over. You know, players come up with all sorts of things to do with objects in the room. But I'm gonna show you how you can make these, which look really, really good, very detailed, and I'm telling you, require basically no skill and like no cost. They do require some patience and a bit of time, but if you're willing to put in the time, you can have a set of these fantastic looking pillars for your table. So gather your materials, sit down at your crafting table, and let's build. You'll need some foam board. Specifically, I use the Ready Board brand from Dollar Tree, as you can easily peel the paper off. If you're not familiar with the product, check out DM Scotty's video explaining it. Once you've peeled off the paper from both sides, cut several 1-inch strips. The amount you will need will depend on how many pillars you plan to make, but as a guideline, each pillar will need 15 lineal inches of foam. Next, cut these strips into 1-inch squares. You don't need to be incredibly precise with this, as some slight variance in size will actually enhance the look later. I just use the 1-inch squares on my cutting mat as a guide, as it's faster than measuring. Now grab a nail file and use it to slightly bevel the edges of each square. Make sure to do this on both sides. 2 or 3 light passes on each edge should be more than enough. Now carve the bricks. Use the edge of your file to cut a groove on the sides of your squares. Do this about 2/3 in from the corners and always keep the grooves on the same corner. It should create a pattern that looks something like this. Once you have a whole bunch of these squares ready, you can start assembling. When you stack these, it's important to flip every second one so you never end up with 2 grooves directly above each other. Once assembled, a realistic brick pattern will appear. The fastest and easiest way to assemble these pillars is with hot glue. I made my pillars 14 squares high. Once your pillars are assembled, use some tin foil to give them some stone texture. For the bases, cut some more foam board into 1.5-inch squares. To give the pillars some weight, I use 1-inch washers. Trace out the washer onto the bases and carefully cut out that area. Cut some cardstock squares slightly smaller than the bases and glue them to the bottom of the foam board. This will hold the washer in place. Now glue your washers into the bases. I decided to use 2 as I wanted these to have a nice amount of weight, but you can get away with using just 1. And bevel the edges of the bases and add some brick lines, just like your other pieces. Then, just hot glue your pillars to their bases. To finish the tops, I added 1 more square as a cap, but this one doesn't have the brick lines carved in. You may end up with some of your washer showing through on the base. To hide that, as well as blend the seam from the base to the pillar, you can use some sort of compound as a filler. I usually use drywall joint compound, but you could use an acrylic caulking or even just some glue. I press a small amount of filler into the seam and then use a wet paintbrush to blend it. To really stiffen up the foam and the seams, I give everything a coat of Mod Podge. You can do this with watered down PVA glue, but I find that for some reason the consistency of Mod Podge allows it to apply a little more easily. To dress up a couple of the pillars, I glue some rubble to the bases. I'm using a decorative broken glass from IKEA as I like the shape of the pieces for rubble. You can use coarse sand, rocks, bits of styrofoam, really anything you have on hand. For added strength, instead of just base coating these pieces with black paint, you can give them another coat of Mod Podge, but with some black paint mixed into it. This is also a great way to ensure full coverage if you're planning on giving these a coat of spray paint. Once the black coat has fully dried, you can give everything a heavy dry brush with dark gray. You're basically looking for full coverage while leaving the cracks black. You can make your brick look a little more interesting by individually painting a selection of bricks with some contrasting colors. I did some with sort of a reddish brown and some in a medium tan. The trick here is not to overdo it, just do several in each color, trying to keep it looking somewhat random. Now, to highlight the stone texture, use a lighter gray to sparingly dry brush the surface. Go very lightly at first, with minimal paint until you feel comfortable with the effect. Complete the paint job with a black wash. I cover how to make your own black wash for very cheap in episode 12. When the black wash has dried, you can add one more layer of protection with a coat of Minoax satin polyurethane as described in episode 10. With all the Mod Podge, these pieces probably don't require it, but I personally like the slight wet look it gives. Alright guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please smash that like button, leave a comment below, and of course, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. You can also find a link in the description below to the Blackmagic Craft Facebook page. There, I post pictures of all sorts of stuff that I'm working on, stuff that doesn't make it to videos. It's also a place that you can send me photos of your own Blackmagic Craft builds. Alright, until next time, peace.